Being a parent also got me to become a better investor. To me, talking to kids has similarity with talking with founders. Try telling your kids what to do. It doesn't work. And founders, the reason why they are in this path is because they have conviction. Telling them what to do just doesn't sit well. So I've adjusted my style and my communication to get the message across so that it lands well, it speaks to the founders, and it becomes a more collaborative relationship. So all of that, has made me a better person.
Welcome to Brave. Learn from Southeast Asia's best tech leaders. Build the future, learn from our past, and stay human in between. No BS on success. I'm Jeremy Au, venture capitalist, serial founder, Harvard MBA, science fiction nerd, and dad of 2 daughters. Every week, we debate startup news, interview changemakers, answer listener questions, and share personal insights. Join our movement of over 40,000 members and get transcripts, resources, and community at www.bravesea.com. Stay well and stay brave. Evo Commerce sells premium affordable supplements and personal care electronics, operating in Singapore, Malaysia, and Hong Kong. Strive brand sells salon-grade quality products for home use and using direct-to-consumer channels through its online retail channels and physical shops. BBAC is the leader in hangover remedies in over 2,000 retail outlets across the region. Learn more at bbac.co and stryv.co. Hey, Jeremy. Really excited to have you on the show.
Hi, Jeremy. Thanks for having me on. Great to be on.
What I've realized is that over the years, many people have confused me for you because we both have the Jeremy, we're both in VC, we both went to Harvard for business school. So I've definitely run into a few of those mistaken identities.
Oh my God. I mean, I guess it's flattering for me then, given that I'm much older than you. So.
Could you share a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. So, like I said, my name is Jeremy. I am the co-founder and managing partner at Tin Man Capital. Tin Man Capital, for those who don't know us, we focus exclusively on B2B tech. We invest as pre-Series A, Series A companies. They are targeting legacy industries as customers. We invest in very capital efficient business and are not reliant on a unicorn to return the fund. We run a focused portfolio. So some of us call us a PE approach to VC. The idea is keep the portfolio tight, very selective, work with the founders because it's a tight portfolio. We can afford to do that. We have the time and resources. And we think it's crucial for a fragmented market like Southeast Asia. Personally, still married, which is good news. I got 2 young kids and I'm originally from Singapore.
You and I, before the podcast started, were swapping parenting notes and, heard that you have one kid is going through the whole PSLE thing. So I got to ask you, Jeremy, what were you like in secondary school and primary school around the time of your PSLE?
I would say that my teachers didn't think too much of me. I don't think they thought that I would make it too far, academically at least. Truth be told, I was playful. I played football. I was very active in school. I think I really got serious about studying when I had a stern warning from my father. At primary 3, kids these days don't play marbles, right? I was playing marbles and I was caught playing, and then he gave me a stern warning, and that's when I decided that, okay, I should focus a little bit. Thankfully, I got a decent PSLE score and got to school of my choice, and now in Victoria School. But I guess I didn't learn my lesson then. I continued playing, right? Played. I was very active in school. I had a great time. Secondary 4 mid-year, I had 24 points, right? That was the basic subject. So my teacher put me aside and said that, look, you can't go to JC with that score. So it's like, okay. So I think I hunkered down and started working. Thankfully, shaved that by half at the prelims to 12, and with affiliation, scraped through to VJC, and then thankfully got 9 points and allowed me to stay on. And that was actually really scraping through because I had 2 humanities, one is history and geography. I guess I didn't have time to study the whole textbook, so I gambled and took a risk to spotted questions that might come out. Got it completely wrong for history, which was my best subject. Got a C for that. And thankfully, my weaker subject, geography, turned out to be an A. I got to thank my lucky stars. So there you go.
And you share this, I resonate a lot of that. I had wanted to go to Victoria Junior College as well back then. But you kind of like turned things around, right? Because you eventually went to university. You also went to Cambridge eventually as well. So how did that happen?
I think in JC, more the same continue. I still wanted to be active. I was a students' council. I pushed for the setup of the first football team, right? A sport that I still play today at 48 years old, despite 2 surgeries. But we'll get to that later. But I did not like the experience in secondary school where I had to cram in the last minute. So I said, I need to do some regular work. So I did enough to not have to be called up by the principal. But at that point in time, I also realized that I wanted to get out of Singapore. And I think it's a function of I felt a little bit like a misfit given the experience I had in school and so on. And let's just put it this way, I'm not a typical student who will sit there and just listen to instruction. So did some research. Obviously, grades matter if you want to apply to good overseas university. Studied, I got decent grades. I wasn't a star student. I didn't get S papers and so on. So the 2.5 years in the army, I spent a lot of time trying to research, apply to universities and so on. And it's really by chance that I got into Cambridge. I say that because it was my last year in the army and someone that I didn't know walked up in the army camp's canteen and said, hey, the deadline is due in a couple of days. Why don't you apply? I'm like, okay, sure. Kind of like happy-go-lucky and applied, scrambled, got the recommendations in, got called up for the entrance exam. And mind you, when I walked into it was held at Hwa Chong Junior College. When I walked into the hall, it was all these students at the peak of their preparation for A-levels. I spent the last 2 years in camouflage running up and down the hill. I completely forgot all my physics and math concepts. So I did what I could do, took up my notes from JC, again, try to spot questions, and thankfully did well enough to get through. The warrant interview, in an interview, I could hear, it was held at a basketball court, and one of my peers, who was quite prominent, I shall not name him, was on the other side of the basketball court. He was getting asked, how does a space shuttle maneuver in space? I quickly tried to maneuver the conversation with the interviewer to my army days, and thankfully he took the bait and was more interested in my army experience and to ask me about chemical engineering, which is what I was applying for. So long story short, I got in, but then there was a second question, which is that, can we afford it? My parents didn't come, I didn't come from means. And at that point, pound was very strong, right? So without a scholarship, I couldn't have gotten in. So I scrambled, I applied. Obviously, I didn't get any luck with the Singapore scholarship except for one army scholarship. But thankfully, the UK government gave me a partial scholarship, which paid for a good chunk of the fees. And my dad stepped up. And with that, I had the privilege to attend Cambridge. And I would say that changed my life.
Amazing. How did Cambridge change your life?
I think in so many ways. First of all, the first time I traveled on the plane was actually on the plane in the army to Brunei. And the first time living overseas properly was actually going to Cambridge. It's a bit of a culture shock, to be honest. I remember finding my way to London, and from London to Cambridge, and then finding my college and walking in there and trying to ask for directions from the admissions office and so on. There was a nice English lady there, and she said to me, young man, slow down. I do not understand what you're saying. And then it dawned on me over many times that we Singaporeans generally speak very quickly and do not enunciate our words. That itself is a culture shock to me. And the weather, I mean, coming out at 4 p.m. and it's dark. It's just not, as a boy who grew up in sunny Singapore, I was just depressed, right? To simple things like the food, the vegetables generally overcooked, yellow instead of green, right? So I was missing home a lot. And with the cold weather setting in, I was missing home a lot. And it didn't help when I made the decision as well. There's a big population of Singaporeans and Malaysians in Cambridge. I had made the decision that I came all the way there. I'm not just going to hang out with them. What's the point? So I initially had difficulty settling in to integrate myself. And then the second part as well, it's then the academics, right? I remember my first exam. I stared at the paper for 45 minutes because growing up in Singapore, by the time you take a major exam, you're done 10-year series, right? Question 5, what's going to come out, right? The way they set the Cambridge papers, those questions, they don't repeat. They don't look the same. So I was shocked, right? I didn't do well in year 1. I had a very sarcastic remark from my professor. So all that shaped my first year. It was tough. So what did I do? I mean, thankfully, I was quite good at football then. And that I played for college, and that allowed me a way through sports as a common language to integrate with the locals, right? They're glad that they have a good player. We hang out after a game over drinks and beer. What I could never get used to is taking warm beer with Indian food and curry. That's something so English, but I never could understand that. But it really helped me integrate, so that was good. I think then Cambridge, from an academic standpoint, changed my life in a few ways. One, the way they've gone about setting the papers, they know by the time you leave uni, the tech would have changed. But what wouldn't change are the first principles. So those questions are set so that you can, even though the question looks different, you can fall back on first principles. And that to me has served me very well in life, right? So whenever I come across a situation, particularly now, my entrepreneurial journey in Tin Man, you'll meet many situations where you have never seen before. It's that training and the confidence to fall back to first principles that really served me well, right? But separately, Cambridge has widened my horizon and opened up doors, honestly. I mean, without that name, I wouldn't have landed my first job, or maybe more difficult to land my first job. Got me to meet friends that I still keep in touch with who are now done really well in life. It's a strong network. And from then, my trajectory really took off because that led me to getting a job in an international bank like Morgan Stanley, which took me to 4 cities around the world. So I always look back at that very fondly. And as a finance person, I always look at the ROI on that, and it's a really strong ROI.
And what's interesting is exactly like you said, is that you chose to be a student, enjoy, integrate, and then at the graduation or as you ramped up to it, you chose to go to Morgan Stanley and also the finance route. Could you share about what was your decision making at that time?
Yeah. At the age of 14, believe it or not, I had a very distinct vision of becoming a refinery engineer. It
Yeah.
was very clear in my head. I told my teachers that I want to pursue chemical engineering. I think it was my second summer at Cambridge. I managed to secure an internship with ExxonMobil in Singapore, Jurong Island. So I remember a pivotal moment when I was climbing up a distillation column. There's a very long column where distillation takes place. I had my hard hat and those hard-toe shoes on. I was climbing in the hot sun. Remember that, yeah, this is not for me. I'm a less so the hardship, but I think it's the surrounding information that I gathered from the experience. I saw the engineers there who are lifers there. They're very good at what they do. And more importantly, they're very passionate. And I knew I did not have the passion at least, right? So that spoke to me. And I realized that, okay, my interest really lies on a more macro view of how businesses are run, investing, and so on. So then after that summer, I pivoted. There are two types of companies that recruit very heavily at campuses. One is investment banking and the other is consulting. I explored a consulting route, realized that it just wasn't my cup of tea. I mean, I need to see something complete and recommendation being adopted and so on. Investment banking appealed to me, and the thought of finance, high finance, working with big companies, being able to interact with the C-suites and so on, with the help of many kind souls who have been down the journey, I was able to reorientate my thinking as an engineer to then prep myself for an interview with an investment bank without obviously understanding anything about finance. So that's how I pivoted.
And so you took this job at Morgan Stanley and you had this whirlwind time, right, at the 4 cities that you mentioned. And then you chose to go for an Harvard MBA.
Yeah. So Morgan Stanley took me first to Hong Kong, then to Singapore. And then at the end of my second year, I received a phone call from someone that I used to work with at Morgan Stanley who moved to New York. He said, look, we need a third-year analyst. Would you come? And I jumped at the opportunity. So that led me to work in the finance center of the world. Why not, right? And let's go. Even though I have never lived in New York before, but let's go. So I went there, really had a good time. And the transaction I worked on was the IPO of the Chicago Mercantile Exchange. At that time, investment banks were laying off people. And right before the roadshow, my VP was laid off. And then I was stuck with the client on the roadshow. And these clients from the Midwest, I have absolutely nothing in common with them. They talk about football, but it's a different football, right? It's football in the hands, and there's no common language. But I told myself, okay, let's go back to first principles. So what can I fall back on? So I say, look, let's get to know them personally. So over the 2 weeks, I got to know the chairman personally, asked about their family, be genuinely interested in their life. And through that, I actually broke through the barriers and I won their trust. At that moment, I think it was halfway through the IPO, the chairman, over several Budweiser Light, which is a terrible beer, by the way, gave me a job offer. Say, why don't you come over with us at Chicago? You help us open up Asia. So I jumped at the opportunity because to take a transaction to fruition and then to join them to grow the business, something that appealed to me. So I did that. Then it dawned on me that a few things. The power of having a strong network. This classic example. You got to know the chairman, they liked you, they like what the work you do. What differentiates me from another resume was that there's a personal relationship. And I wanted to have that network. And the sole reason why I applied to business school was because I want access to the network. So hence I applied to a few schools. Thankfully, I got into one, Harvard Business School, and that set my journey on to the HBS.
Amazing. What was the experience like at HBS?
I think a few things. I tell this to a lot of fresh people who just go in and about into the school. I didn't quite enjoy the first year, at least definitely the first few months of the first year. It felt that everyone were either over caffeinated or on steroids, because there's this anxiety to prove themselves. There's an anxiety to want to get to meet as many people as you can and not lose out. There's a FOMO there. So as a result, the interactions are all very transient. Hi, bye. What do you do? And then you can see in their eyes, they're doing a calculation. Are you useful for me? And so on. And then they move on. For someone who values a deep relationship, it just wasn't enjoyable for me. That change, I think, it's subsequently at the end of first year and the second year where everyone comes down, I did form some really, really good relationship that I still keep today. As the case study method is Socratic, a lot of your grades depend on how much you speak up in class and bring strong points. I struggled with that in the first few months because I look at everyone around us, especially Europeans, Americans, they sound so eloquent, put together. The points sound so robust. And I'm sitting here thinking, I just don't have the points to make. But as I get to know my classmates in deeper conversations, I realize that actually I know as much as them, if not more than them, and a different perspective to bring, given that I'm international students and there's interest in Asia and so on. So they gave me the courage to speak up finally and to bring my points across. And I would say that of all the skill sets that I acquired in business school, that's one of the more important ones because being able to articulate your thoughts succinctly and concisely is really useful when I rejoin the workforce. I think a lot of us have good ideas, but how you communicate your ideas is important to empower people, to convince decision makers and followers to help fulfill your vision is communication. So that's one key skill set and takeaway that I took from HBS. Overall, the 2 years, I had a really good experience. I made some very powerful network. The ROI, I would say there's a huge J curve, I would say, compared to Cambridge. But I say as you get more senior, the network gets more powerful. And I would say that Tinman fundraising would have been a lot more difficult without the Harvard network.
How has the network been helpful for you?
In many small ways. After Harvard, I worked 2 years at a bulge bracket PE fund in Boston. They only hire one per cohort, so it's very exclusive. In my section, there was a classmate that worked there, so that was helpful. It does understanding the culture for the interviewers to know a bit more about me beyond the interview slots and so on. And I was very, very glad that I had the opportunity to work there. And two, when I decided to move back to Singapore, I decided to move back because I saw the growth here. And also honestly, after 10 years overseas, from wanting to get out of Singapore, I then have the context to say, I want to come home. This is home, right? I moved back without a job. I just got on a plane and moved back. And within months, weeks actually, I got referrals, coffee chats. There's a lot of interest in terms of people wanting to hire. And mind you, that was two post Lehman imploding and GFC setting in. And then through that, I landed a lot of this through the Harvard network. And then I landed my job, and then the rest was history. And I think along the way, fast forward Tin Man, right? Some of our anchor are from the Harvard network. And it's because they've seen, in this case, me over the years, and that builds trust and they understand the person they're backing. So that's really helpful as well. But also in daily life, when you need someone to call someone to understand a little bit about a particular industry and so on, all that is helpful. On the personal side, you're traveling to, I don't know, Australia for work or to the US or Europe, you just post in a WhatsApp group, hey, I'm coming and who's around? And then, there's always classmates around and it's always good and cathartic to just catch up. It's as though that, we never stop talking to each other, right? So on many levels, I think that's a beautiful network to have.
And what's interesting is that you were sharing about your experience because you moved from investment banking into have like follow through. And then now you're doing more of this private equity and private assets. And then you did M&A. So how did you make the transition to say this is venture capital and technology is actually a more interesting subset or set that you want to go after?
Yeah. So maybe let's talk a little bit about what I did before founding Tinman, right, to give context. So I rejoined Morgan Stanley in 2000 and I helped set up the principal investment desk for commodities. Morgan Stanley obviously has a great trading platform, but I wasn't trading. I sat next to the traders. My job was to invest in hard assets. So we could be lending money to a pre-production coal mine and they'll pay us back with the underlying commodities at a discount. And then my traders can trade around that. Spent many months in the remote area in Australia building storage tanks for diesel. So I did that for 5-6 years, coincided with a nice super cycle for commodities. Then I left because it became increasingly hard as the banks got more regulated. GFC was headhunted by Trafigura, which is one of the largest oil trading firms in the world. The title there was Head on Investments for Asia Pac and Middle East. They're very deep into emerging markets, Africa. They want to do the same in this region. First deal to be invested in was in Papua New Guinea. Last deal is in Pakistan. So very frontier markets. Through that journey, with commodities with the underlying common factor input, because we were supplying to supply chain logistics company construction firm, manufacturers, shipping firm, and so on, agriculture as well. So all these are what I call the legacy industries in Southeast Asia, and they're also the big part of GDP. And I formed deep relationship understanding of this sector, but also I noticed that these sectors, they need to digitize. You're dealing with sometimes hundreds of millions worth of cargo, and it's all over email and pen and paper. So that's what I observed. And then along the way, I started investing in angel deals, first by backing some of our classmates from Harvard, helping them break to Asia. And I got hooked. I was getting up at 6 a.m. All I had was my equity, trying to bridge calls between LA and New York. And I just loved, instead of just moving numbers, we're building something. And that to me was very uplifting. It was very inspiring. I love the idea of disrupting the incumbents. So that's the first taste of VC, but then they also got me a front row seat of what's happening around Southeast Asia. Along 2016, 2017, I also came to a crossroads in my career. I was offered promotion to run the function globally at Geneva with a clear path towards growth within Trafigura. I always talked about starting my own things. I think my wife in particular has been sick of hearing me saying it without doing it. And I think it's time to make a decision. So around that time, a life-changing event happened. My dad passed away unexpectedly. And it was a very difficult moment for me to lose someone who has been supportive and given me the opportunities in life. And it dawned on me, I know it's a cliche, but only when you lose something precious that you truly internalize it, that life is short. I think all that in combination got me to overcome what was holding me back, which is a fear of failure to start my own things. So with that, we then embarked. Then I met Muli, my partner, and a lot of things clicked. He was ready, I was ready. Our values are very aligned. We're both self-made people. We share values like integrity and transparency. We're both first principle thinkers as well. And then when we hashed out what we see in Southeast Asia and the thesis that we had and what we could offer, it was a match. So for the first time, the head, the heart, and the gut aligned. And I just knew I had to do it. So then that transition, then I turned down the promotion and embarked on starting Tin Man, and it's been 7 years already. So there you go.
Wow. And what was it like for you to raise that first fund? Because you're really part of that almost first wave of VC funds or fundraising in Southeast Asia. So new market, new thesis. How was that like back then?
Before we embarked on fundraising, we each wrote on a piece of paper how much we think we can bring to the table. And I added up the number. It was like, oh my God, it's less than 10 million. Come on. That's not a good start. But anyways, it was difficult. I talk about jumping in, but it's hard to raise a first fund. It's very hard. And with hindsight, I think it's a function of a few things. Number one, unlike markets like the US, China, India, the sophistication, the stage of development is still quite nascent here, relatively speaking. That also means that the type of LPs who would allocate or understand venture capital, it's quite limited. It was a slog, to be honest, right? And then we quite quickly figured out that we need to look outside Singapore. So thankfully, the Harvard network kicked in and so on. And we got first anchor LP, second anchor LP. And then what we have success as well is strategic LPs from this region that have worked with us before. And we have deliberately set up for strategic LPs because I know they're digitizing. They do not want to run their own CVC. They view us as an outpost for them. So all that click and we have use for them because our startups go to market via them. It's a good match. So from then, we started building and then got to fund one, fund size, and then we started deploying and thankfully have good results and we built from there.
Could you share about a time that you personally have been brave?
Yeah, I would say coming back is setting up Tin Man, right? Let me just expound on that a bit. I talk about fear of failure. If you recall, my dad make up the difference for Cambridge. It's not a small amount. And it was a time, 97, 2000, where Asian crisis happened and the pound was, let's put it this way, it's 12 Sing dollars to get a plate of duck rice in the UK. That put him and his business under a lot of stress, and we went through very hard times. And that always had a deep scar emotionally for me. And I carried the scar all these years for the fear of failure. And the act of starting Tin Man, I had to really overcome that fear of failure. What will my friends think of me? Can I support my family? Can I do it? It is a relationship that I guess have mastery over now before I make the jump. So if I look back, that's one of the things that, was emotionally and very hard for me, but thankfully I did.
Why would you describe it as a scar?
It's a scar because at a young age, I had to step in and help support the family as well. Without going into too much details, it was a very, very hard times. We're talking about financial stress and so on. And at that point, being a young person, just starting out your career, and I was the oldest son. So it kind of felt that I'm the last fallback. So there's a lot of stress and that pain I associate with that particular episode in my life. And then unknowingly, I carried that and been chasing money and big names and the security of that. And the thought of coming out on your own, not having that safety net, and with that scar and that very emotional experience I had, made that decision to embark on an uncertain entrepreneurial path very difficult, emotionally very draining.
How do you take care of yourself when it's very draining?
Oh, that's a very good question. I'm still learning to juggle, but what I do every morning is that I journal. I spend a few minutes just write down my thoughts, write down things I'm grateful for, because I know how my mind works. It tends to focus on the negatives, and just having that time to just focus on what has gone. That has been very grounding for me. Small breaks along the way, just very simple things. When you're in a taxi, you do a deep breathing, and I exercise every day. So exercise does gives me that uplift and that reprieve from not having to think about work. Weekends, generally, I switch off and spend time with the family and kids and carve out just a few hours just to meet to myself, because weekends actually you're sending the kids around. So what I do is I get up early in the morning. My routine is Saturday, I head out to do some fishing. So a couple of hours before I take the kids swimming. So that being with nature and so on, for me, helps me ground myself.
You shared about how your parents played a pivotal role in your life. How has becoming a parent changed your reflection about your own personal experiences and memory of that?
This is an interesting one. Having been a parent, I think it brings back what my mom used to tell me, which is that next time when you have your own kids, you will understand. Of course, I will never let her know that I understand that now. But I guess they are mirror image of you. They are mirror to yourself. And the rebellious, the questioning back and so on, they're basically reflecting you back to yourself, essentially. And it's very humbling that, for you to take a look, for me to take a look at what I could change and do better. That's a role model for them. I have to change as well the way I parent. When I grew up, there's a household with a cane that was still condoned at that point in time, but now it's different. Yelling doesn't help either. Try to rewire how I was parent to new ways of parenting has been challenging for me. But that has changed me as well. Being a parent also got me to become a better investor. And here are the reasons why. To me, talking to kids has similarity with talking with founders. Try telling your kids what to do. It doesn't work, right? And founders, the reason why they are in this path is because they have conviction. Telling them what to do just doesn't sit well. So I've adjusted my style and my communication to get the message across so that it lands well, it speaks to the founders, and it becomes a more collaborative relationship. So all of that, has made me a better person. I think finally when you carry my first child in my hand, I was going through a particularly stressful time at work, but then you realize there are more important things in life, like when your child falls sick, that's something worth worrying. The rest of the stuff is small stuff, right? So all that is how parenting and being a parent has shaped me and continue to shape me.
And last question is, if you could travel back in time to your younger self when you were going to sit for your PSLE, you had a time travel machine, if you had coffee with your younger self, what would you say?
At that age, I think I wouldn't have changed what I've done. I mean, I've done enough to get past and so on. I think at the age of 19, when I was going through the army, right, that's when I make the switch mentally from happy-go-lucky to I gotta be serious in my life. But I think I swung in the pendulum to the other end, became very stressed, became very serious. And all that is because I have a lot to lose here. My parents are paying for this. I better make sure that I get it done and so on. All that weight. I will go back then and tell myself then that, look, it's okay. Things will work out. You do your best and things will work out. I think with that, I'll be a much happier person. I think my friends will enjoy being around me more, and perhaps I will have the capacity to expand my life experience, travel a bit more, and still being stressed about it.
Thank you. On that note, I'd love to kind of summarize the 3 big takeaways I got from this conversation. First of all, thank you so much for sharing about your early childhood and what you were like as a student in terms of academics, in terms of what you're stressed about, how you worked your way through your academics to eventually land at Cambridge and Harvard. And I think there's a fascinating journey there. Secondly, thanks so much for sharing about your professional career, about how you started focusing on finance, but also some of the career decisions you made, the opportunities you took up, the networks that you were able to leverage, and how you eventually became a VC as well. Lastly, thanks so much for sharing about your own reflective philosophy as a parent and as somebody who's looking back upon your prior career about how you would have done things differently and how you would have viewed life differently in light of your new experiences that you have today. On that note, thank you so much, Jeremy, for sharing.
Oh, thanks for having me. It's been fun.
Thank you for listening to Brave. If you enjoyed this episode, please share the podcast with your friends and colleagues. We would also appreciate you leaving a rating or review. Head over to www.bravesea.com for member content, resources, and community. Stay well and stay brave.